Evolution Sportster fans span the globe. The model years 1986 to 2022 have a wide and loyal following. Over those years, there were changes in the chassis, engine, transmission, and accessories. For a loyal owner or enthusiastic buyer, there are no bad years. There are, however, improvements and features that draw us to a particular theme model or engineering period. Buying a pre-owned Evolution Sportster is exciting. We can start with a blank slate and confidence that there is an abundance of bikes in the market. Then the search gets refined and focuses on the larger changes that distinguish the Sportster's engineering over time. We narrow the search to model years and packages that best serve our needs and personal tastes. Since there is no shortage of available pre-owned Evolution Sportsters, finding the right bike in the right condition should not be difficult. The model theme is your choice, based on your tastes, so let's stick to universal concerns and the technology that affects safety, handling, ease of operation, tuning demands, serviceability, and reliability. In this overview, we'll start with the early Evolution Sportsters built from 1986 to 90. Harley-Davidson introduced the Evolution version of the Sportster just a few years after the launch of the Big Twin Evolution 1340cc models. The 1340cc Big Twin single camshaft models drew strongly on the earlier shovelhead bottom end, while the Sportster kept its unit, engine, transmission construction, and 4 camshafts. Many proven 1000cc features from the Ironhead era were built into the 1986 Evolution models that launched as 883cc and 1100cc versions. Evolution upgrades largely focused on the cylinders, cylinder heads, and valve train. True to Harley-Davidson's engineering and design approach, the Sportster chassis went largely unchanged. From a production and parts interchangeability standpoint, it is practical and profitable not to radically redesign a chassis and powertrain. Ford proved this with the 1909 to 1927 Model T and the 1932 to 1953 flathead V8 engines. The original small block Chevrolet V8, in its many forms, lasted from 1955 to 1991. Similarly, Harley-Davidson's big V-twin knucklehead lasted from 1936 to 1947. The panhead to 1965. The shovelhead from 1966 to a few 1984 models, Big Twin Evolutions from a limited launch in 1983 to a few 1999 remnant models, and the Evolution Sportster engines from 1986 to 2022. The Evo upgrade and introduction into the Sportster chassis was nothing like the sweeping, clean slate chassis and powertrain revision found in the late Sportster S, a bike that redefined the Harley-Davidson Sportster. The 1986 Evo Sportster's lower engine largely carried over from the previous generation Sportster. There were notable casting and machining differences to mount the new Evolution alloy cylinders, heads, and valve train. The clear visual distinctions included the rocker covers, an aluminum alloy cylinder, and head castings that replaced the earlier Ironhead components. Many primary, gear, and internal parts carried part numbers dating back to 1977 and earlier. Some of these parts go forward to the last rigid mount engines in 2003. This helps with parts availability. A significant difference between these early Evolution Sportsters and the 1991 up groups is the 4-speed transmission. By 1986, nearly all competitive bikes had 5 or even 6-speed transmissions. Harley-Davidson, still banking on the torque of its robust V-twin engines, stayed with its traditional 4-speed. Arguably, a 5th gear allows the final drive and overall gearing to have a broader range, from a lower first gear to the equivalent of an overdrive gear on top. Is this a deal breaker? Not for the many content 4-speed owners. The 1969 BSA Rocket 3 and even my 2000 Honda XR650R Enduro bike lack an overdriving top gear. My BSA had only 4 speeds, and the XR650R has only 5 speeds instead of the 6 like many off-road motorcycles. Admittedly, when riding the Honda on the highway in dual sport mode, I often fish for a non-existent 6th gear. The 1969 Rocket 3 750 triple had so much horsepower and torque that 4 speeds worked okay on the road. 1986 to 90 Sportsters were relatively light. At 457 pounds dry, they were close in weight to the Rocket 3. With V-twin torque, Sportster 4-speeds do work. The 1991 up 5-speeds were a distinct improvement, though. If you can find a clean, lower-mileage first-generation Evolution Sportster, test ride it to see how 4-speeds feel. Does a 4-speed meet your needs? You can change the sprocket gearing if a taller 4th gear is desired, although that also makes first gear taller. A chain and sprockets final drive carries over from the Ironhead era. A belt and sprockets were introduced in most 1991 Sportster models and all Sportsters by 1993. Early Evo Sportsters do have a conventional chain and sprockets final drive. Not a loss, in fact performance builders consider this a plus and convert from belt drive to chain drive. Chain drive does require regular maintenance. Minimal maintenance is the key attribute of belt drive. There are subtle changes during each group change in the Evolution era. If you find a desirable bike anywhere within the 1986 to 2022 model years, research the engine serial and casting numbers. Always be clear whether the engine and transmission unit is original. Swaps of later 5-speed engines into the earlier frames are possible, with slight frame and kickstand modifications. Always verify the originality of any Sportster you are considering. Check engine and frame serial numbers for a matchup. Title and registration inspection will require an accurate frame serial number that has not been modified. Many regard the 1986 to 2003 rigid mount models as more serviceable and simpler. It's true that a carburetor and a conventional ignition can be easier to troubleshoot and work on, especially alongside the road or outside your motel room. This holds true on the Sportster through model year 2006. In 2007, the Sportster switches to EFI, a major transition that involves entirely different troubleshooting and service steps. I will go into depth on that subject in the next episode of the series. Carburation versus fuel injection, or more accurately electronic fuel and spark management, is a significant distinction and choice when deciding which model year Evolution Sportsters to consider. 1986 to 90 Sportsters are not a large departure from the Ironhead era. Harley-Davidson marketing relied on buyers and owners with traditional Sportster tastes and expectations. 1991 to 2003 would see a shift to more factory theme models and options. Harley-Davidson, like Jeep and others, monitored the aftermarket parts and accessories market. Consumer tastes and interests led to desirable factory packages. You weren't just buying a new Sportster, you bought a custom, sport, hugger, deluxe, or niche trim and theme package. The strategy worked and later evolved into offerings like the Roadster, 48, 72, Iron, Nightster, Low, and other models. These bikes capture cues, beginning with a custom wheel and tire look that many buyers want. Theme models have distinct features like the brakes, seat, front fork, custom paint with period lettering, fuel tank size and shape, peg and foot control positioning, trim and mirrors, instrumentation, front fender, handlebars, and other recognizable, easy-to-spot changes. Harley-Davidson got my attention with the 1998 to 2003 XR1200S Sport and its upgrades. This model was in showrooms when I went on book tours at the launch of my Harley-Davidson Evolution V-Twin Owner's Bible in 1999. The XR1200S Sportster Sport was more than a facelift or bolt-on accessories. While all 1998 engines benefited from an improved oil pump for the dry sump lubrication systems, the XR1200S package added Buell Lightning dual spark plug cylinder heads, hotter camshafts, 10-to-1 compression, and a single-fire ignition. 76 to 78 pound-foot of torque at 4,000 RPM was a good bump and led to a recorded 13.39 second quarter mile at 95.2 miles per hour. A distinct chassis upgrade is a double front brake rotors introduced in the original 1996 Sport models, plus damping and preload adjustment on the 39mm cartridge front fork. The bike boasts spring and rebound damping adjustments at the reservoir rear shocks. Suspension adjustability can be an overlooked game changer. We'll get into that when the channel finds its Evo Sportster. Following the tradition of the classic XLCH ironheads, Harley-Davidson took the production XR1200S handling and powertrain performance to a new level, despite the overwhelming popularity of the XR1200C custom model with its 21-inch spoke front and cast 16-inch rear wheel look. The XR1200S runs a practical 19-inch front and 16-inch rear tubeless tire on cast spoke wheels. A factory hot rod, as Harley-Davidson called it in advertising literature. The XR1200S sold reasonably well between 1998 and 2003. These bikes are available in the pre-owned market. The 1998 to 2003 XR1200S is a unique model, relatively light, boasting more torque and horsepower, an upgraded suspension system and better lane angle, upgrade braking, plus a classic look. The Sport is among the last rigid mount engines. 2003 was the final Sportster trapdoor engine bolted directly into the frame. This engineering dated to the earliest motorcycles, and vibration is inherent with rigid mount engines. Traditional riders like me were accustomed to vibration, more so with the extremes like a single-cylinder thumper or parallel twin without a counterbalance shaft. On my BSA bikes, each being a rigid mount 1969 model, the Rocket 3750 with its 3-rod journal crankshaft was the smoothest. A Harley-Davidson's rigid mount Sportster V-Twin engine's vibration escalates progressively from 4,000 to 6,000 RPM. This is not an engine that needs to be wrung out. With its inherent and impressive bottom-end torque, 5,500 RPM makes a practical redline. Looking at the typical XL883 or 1200's torque curve, shift points between 2,000 and 3,500 RPM would make sense for fuel efficiency. Vibration aside, for performance and handling, the XR1200S makes my list of possible picks for the channel's Sportster. Regarding vibration, Harley-Davidson's V-Twin Evo engines didn't stand a chance. An out-of-phase 45-degree cylinder angle with a single connecting rod journal is a perfect recipe for vibration. Fortunately, in engineering terms, the crankshaft's hefty flywheels can be weighted to balance out the up and down or vertical shake while leaving the unwanted remaining imbalance on the horizontal plane. That horizontal vibration is somewhat canceled by the natural forward movement of the motorcycle. This worked as far back as the hardtail frames and Springer front fork era. It works reasonably well with a rigid mount Evolution engine. Vibration in any engine is an expression of harmonics. Like other challenging engine designs, a prime example being 90-degree V6s without a counterbalance shaft, the 45-degree V-twin can only be balanced for specific RPM ranges. Factory balancing addresses the engine's harmonics created at road operating speeds. With an awkward motorcycle engine design, this will likely target the top gear cruise speed. Balance is never perfect, and that's where rubber engine mounts help. According to XL1200S reviews in 1998, approximately 65 miles per hour with stock gearing was the RPM ceiling before vibration overwhelmed the bike's lower handlebars. A prominent moto journalist complained that the Sportster's higher RPM vibration numbed his hands. In my experience, this is an exaggeration. I encourage objective feedback from rigid engine mount Sportster owners and riders. Please share your rigid mount Sportster experience at the channel's community comments. If you're accustomed to rubber engine mounts or smoother parallel 4-cylinder and counterbalanced modern engines, weigh whether a rigid mount Sportster's vibration is acceptable. Lacking the plush, lazy boy feel of a big twin touring bike, the rigid mount Evo Sportster may be too Spartan. For 2004, Harley-Davidson completely revamped the Sportster's lower engine, building rubber mounts into a new engine and transmission case. The rubber mount unit construction case eliminates the trap door and makes the transmission accessible only by removing the engine and tearing it down far enough to split the crankcase. The ability to service transmission gears with the engine in the frame was gone. For 2004 and newer Sportsters, the rubber mount engine transmission unit got an updated frame to match. Many applaud the 2004 up rubber mount engines and frames, and for good reason. The smoothness is immediately evident and significant. If a smoother ride and less vibration above 65 miles per hour are your priorities, these rubber mount models make a good choice. However, rubber mounting the engine did come with a price. The redesigned lower engine, new frame, and wider rear wheel and tire added weight. 2004 Sportsters weigh substantially more than their counterpart 2003 rigid mount model. 2007 up EFI models have a wet weight around 565 pounds. This borders on the weight of a sport touring bike. Fortunately, EFI produces more torque and horsepower, improving performance and often fuel efficiency. From a tune and service standpoint, the 2004 to 2006 models still use a constant velocity carburetor and are easier to troubleshoot and repair than 2007 and newer Sportsters with EFI and electronic fuel and spark engine management. 2004 to 2006 engines gained a crankshaft position sensor and a single-fire electronic ignition system. While the additional weight of rubber mount models is a concern, some of this weight reflects the updated cradle frame. Harley-Davidson, much to its credit, had always built motorcycles around a substantial cradle frame. This continues to the end of the Evolution Sportster era. The Sportster S and its Revolution engine ended that cradle frame tradition with a fashionable trellis frame that uses the engine as a stressed member. Many owners like the 2004 to 2006 models for their performance, relative ease of maintenance, and a balance between traditional Sportster serviceability and a more contemporary riding experience. Due to carburation, 2004 to 2006 Sportster California models require a catalytic converter in the front muffler. All 2006 883 models have a cat in the front muffler. These converters are a passive device and not conspicuous. EFI in 2007 eliminated the need for a cat through the 2013 models. 2014 and newer model Evolution Sportsters face tighter emission standards. They use a catalytic converter in both the front and rear muffler. A significant development in the rubber mount era is the factory theme bikes. These models get increasingly closer to the look or performance that previously required aftermarket customization. There is an advantage to consumers when parts like wheels, handlebars, suspension, the front fork, or brakes have been upgraded with factory-endorsed or engineered components. While many Sportster owners personalize or modify their bikes to meet performance expectations or tastes, finding a desirable factory paint scheme, seat, wheels, braking, front fork, rear shocks, and trim can save considerably. The right theme model comes equipped with factory-installed components that others buy aftermarket. You don't have to wonder about parts quality, the installation quality, or your safety. Theme bikes in the Evolution Sportster era began with the 883 Hugger in 1987, followed by an XR1200 Hugger in 1989. These lowered bikes conjure images from the chopper era and have been popular with a strong segment of Sportster enthusiasts. Like Jeep 4x4s, Harley-Davidson owners personalize and modify their motorcycles more than any other brand. The 883 is grossly underestimated, pigeonholed by critics and even dealerships as a quote-unquote beginner's bike. In truth, the 883s can be versatile motorcycles on their own. The original Sportster from 1957 to 71 had an undersquare 883 engine. Despite the early bike's performance image and mystique, something got lost in the transition to the modern era. The good news for anyone is that the 883 shares so many components with the XR1200 engines that a relatively simple parts package can build the upper engine to 1200 cc's or even larger displacement. Hammer Performance and others simplify parts installation with kits. Given the option of building up an 883 to a larger displacement provides additional Sportster options. Often, sellers reduce the price of an 883 due to the stigma around the supposed limitations. While the 883 performs well in stock form, word on the street and spilling over to dealerships is that the Evolution 883 is a beginner's bike. Or worse yet, the derogatory and unfounded girl's bike. On that note, at the Street Vibrations event this year, there were many women riding their own big twin bikes. If 883cc power is satisfying, or a model like the Iron 883 is appealing, capitalize on the stigma. Consider an 883 based on the style you like. If power is lacking, consider an LA sleeve, Hammer Performance, Keith Black or similar upgrade to 1200 cc's or more. Weigh the cost of a 1200 kit or the Hammer Performance 1250 kit, plus the minor tuning changes that accompany the bore size bump. See the Hammer Performance website for the kit costs and factor that into what you're willing to pay for an 883 Evolution Sportster. Hammer claims the upgrade takes just hours without touching the engine's lower end. 2007 is a milestone year. In the next episode, we'll focus on the pluses and minuses of EFI. EFI in the emissions and fuel efficiency era has been a boon to manufacturers. When I wrote for popular hot rodding Corvette Fever, Off-Road Magazine, the Portland Oregonian newspaper, and a host of other automotive enthusiast outlets in the 80s and 90s, we watched EFI save the internal combustion engine. Electronic fuel and spark management not only brought emissions into compliance, it also launched a modern horsepower race and rekindled a second muscle car era. Unfortunately, the 45-degree air-cooled and 2-valve per-cylinder Evolution V-Twin is not a candidate for the trending emission standards and constraints. Thanks to EFI, the Sportster Evo V-Twin continued to meet compliance through the final Evolution models, which were the 2022 883s. However, to meet pending European and U.S. standards, the Sportster's traditional 45-degree V-Twin would no longer work. More than any other factor, this ushered in the high-tech Sportster S Revolution engine and a new high-tech chassis to serve it. The Revolution engine sees additional use in the Pan America ADV adventure bike. We can fret over this trend and speculate whether it will redefine Harley-Davidson and its consumer base, or we can move on and be glad that there are so many traditional Ironhead and Evo Sportsters still available in the used motorcycle market. They will be here for a long time. By the time the Evolution Sportster acquired EFI, Harley-Davidson had advanced to a reliable Delphi fuel and spark management system. The big twin Evo 1340cc engines began a transition to sequential EFI in the mid-90s. At that time, the system of choice was Magneti Marelli. Between 1995 and 2001, Harley-Davidson and big twin owners struggled with the system's reliability and drivability issues. Delphi came online in 2002 big twins and has served well in Evolution Sportsters from 2007 to 2022. Carburetors, or EFI, both work. Harley-Davidson describes common and proprietary tools in the service manuals for diagnosing EFI troubles and rebuilding carburetors. Carburetors are mechanical and can be overhauled with basic tools. If you plan to do your own service work, be aware of the service tool costs for the model being considered, as shop hourly labor rates now range between $100 and $200 per shop hour. You could find it cost-effective to invest in tools and the factory workshop manual for your model. I certainly do. This channel's aim is to empower owners to safely and reliably service their own motorcycles. I will share troubleshooting steps for 2007 up models. If carburetor equipped, I will make a video on step-by-step rebuilding. I have the tools needed for diagnosing and servicing automotive carburation and EFI systems. I can demonstrate how to improvise or add the tools necessary for maintaining the channel's Evolution Sportster. Making and modifying tools can be creative and fun. In the next episode, I will compare the features and describe the assets and shortcomings of both carburation and EFI. This can help you decide whether you want a Sportster with a carburetor or EFI. There are many Evo Sportster theme models. They can be creative and artful, or performance and handling oriented. As technology advanced over the Evo era, each model got a portion of it. While we all want a sharp-looking Sportster, I'm leaning toward the better handling and performing models. The 98 to 2003 Sport and the late XL1200CX Roadster each have handling features. Dual rotor front brakes are a quick way to spot these two models. Wheels are cast and tires are tubeless. Wheel and tire sizing, front fork, rake, and trail each contribute to better handling. The Sport and Roadster boast a better lean angle and cornering ability, challenging the foremost criticism from the Sportster haters. The rigid mount XL1200S Sport has a classic look, plus factory engine and chassis upgrades. A late Roadster would be a candidate for a cafe fairing. I'd leave the rigid frame Sport as stock as possible. Each of these bikes has mid-controls and a sportier, more alert riding posture, to each his or her own. The XR1200, XR1200X is unique and clearly a niche motorcycle. This is a production model that comes closest to a true sport bike. In a league of its own, the XR1200 chassis focuses on handling. The powertrain is Buell-influenced and tuned. Properly set up, these bikes run in the Vance & Hines AMA Pro Racing Series and can negotiate a road course impressively. This is a hybrid bike, neither a traditional cruiser nor a world-class MotoGP prototype. It is a V-twin motorcycle that has been bred and tweaked for performance, proving that a Sportster-inspired and derived motorcycle can negotiate a road course. The XR embraces the rich XR750 flat track and road racing legacy and validates that a mass-produced Harley-Davidson motorcycle can handle. Built and tuned properly, the time-honored 45-degree Harley-Davidson V-twin engine can deliver substantial, usable torque. Set up to perform like a sporting machine, the XR chassis can corner and brake. The Evolution Sportster's latent performance and inherent stamina get translated into a distinctive, bona fide sport road bike. The XR1200 and XR1200X motorcycles draw from the legacy of the XRTT 750 road racing legend and the Sportster-derived XR750 that dominated flat-track racing for half a century. Unfortunately, the XR1200 and XR1200X faced a cultural hurdle that Harley-Davidson had created. The Harley Owners Group, or HOG, and the motor company's big twin marketing had been a coup for sales. Harley-Davidson unabashedly promoted the more profitable FX bikes and luxury FL touring motorcycles. The Sportster, once the iconic symbol of high performance, had been demoted to a beginner's bike. Dealerships would have liked a training wheels kit for the Sportsters to further push customers into the higher gross profit big twins. The reception was less than supportive when Harley-Davidson's best handling production sport model appeared in showrooms. The leather badass costumes sold under the Harley-Davidson label did not fit the XR1200's profile. These bikes languished in showrooms. By contrast, the European response to the XR1200 was enthusiastic. Riders at Europe and the British Isles appreciate sporty motorcycles that can handle. The U.S. sales of Buell, XR1200, and XR1200X motorcycles never hit stride. The 2008 to 2012 combined sales for XR1200 and XR1200X bikes totaled 12,184 motorcycles, less than one sluggish year of Evo-era XL Sportster sales. Like the Buell, the XR1200 and XR1200X vanished from Harley-Davidson dealerships. Today, the XR1200 and more refined XR1200X have become cult bikes and border on collectibles. While the Revolution Sportster S strives to change buyer perceptions of a Sportster, the abandoned XR1200 and XR1200X remind me of the 1990 Corvette ZR1 and its exotic breakthrough 32-valve LT5 engine. I tested and wrote about the ZR1 for Corvette Fever magazine in 1989. We drove these cars at Riverside and Watkins Glen. My photographs earned a center spread story and cover shot. After 1995, the unique ZR1 with the LT5 engine was superseded by the next generation of Corvette muscle models. Chevrolet had moved on and left the LT5 V8 in its rearview mirror. The XR1200 and XR1200X are the Harley-Davidson equivalents to the ZR1. My only concern about owning an XR1200 or XR1200X and riding it would be parts availability. Given the production numbers, Harley-Davidson is likely tapered off on any XR1200 or XR1200X parts that don't interchange with common Evolution Sportster components. Like Buell motorcycle owners, XR1200 restorers will be searching the niche forums and eBay for rare parts. Collectible is often a euphemism for limited production and scarcity of parts. For that reason, I'm leaving the Buell motorcycle off the radar screen in my search for a Harley-Davidson V-Twin powered sport motorcycle. Fortunately, there are well-deserved and loyal support networks and online forum communities for both the Buell and XR1200. I trust this overview helps narrow and inform your personal search for the right Evolution Sportster. The next episode will be a dive into the virtues and shortcomings of carburation and EFI. There is a clear line in the sand between the 1986 to 2006 models and the 2007 to 2022 Sportsters. The induction system change in 2007 is a milestone. Stay tuned.